This conference will now be recorded.
Watch is a minute off, but we're ready to go. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call the annual budget public hearing by the Board of Finance to order. I welcome all of you. We're going to lead in the Pledge of Allegiance. Where is the flag? We have a flag. You can stand me and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let me try and explain to everybody how I think everything's going to go. Each of the various boards is going to do a presentation. So the Dan Pahamas, as chair of the town council, will present the sewer debt service and capital improvement budget for the fiscal year 25-26. Then I'll call on the Board of Education, which will be done by Dr. Carla Mola, for the budget. Then we're going to go into questions, and we're going to have some slide presentations. So some ground rules for the questions. First of all, individuals can have up to 3 minutes. And what we're going to be doing is people who are live are going to speak over there. People who are online are going to speak over there. And everybody should be respectful. If you want to applaud after someone asks a question, you may do so, but no booing, no heckling. So that's just a requirement. You have to state your name and address for the record so that we will know who spoke. All individuals will have an opportunity to speak once before you get a chance to ask questions for a second time. The virtual audience members who want to provide comments use the virtual meeting link on WebLink rather than phone numbers. And please use your hand raise feature because that will allow us to call on you. And we're probably going to alternate unless, and looking at the number of people on the virtual meeting, there are more people here than there are in the virtual meeting. In which case, after we alternate, if we run out of people on one side or the other, we will just continue. So I assume there are no questions, but we will keep things orderly. If you ask a question, we will do our best to answer it. We can't always know the answer to all questions off the top of our heads, in which case, if you speak to me, I will do our best to make sure that we get your email address and we can respond to your questions later on. So, Mr. Pahamas, would you like to go right there and take that podium? And then we'll be able to use the slides.
Thank you, Houston. Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
The Board of Finance is going to move so we can actually
I'll give you a
see
second
the
to
slides.
I guess while you all are moving, I'll take a second to thank Board of Ed members, thank the Board of Finance members, thank the Town Council members. I know a lot of work goes into this every year. Town manager and the assistant town manager, Tom DeStasio, our Finance Director. Lots of work goes into this budget every year. It's my pleasure to be here and present it to you today. So if you go to the next slide, please. You'll notice, for those of you who have been coming to this year over year, you'll notice this slide deck looks a little different than usual. It can sometimes feel like a bludgeoning of numbers. So I'm hoping to reduce that bludgeoning effect a little bit this year and put more narrative around it. This here is kind of like, this is the high level summary, right? This is general fund. So this excludes our special revenue funds. And then what I really want to highlight here is, if you look at the town expenditures for the general fund, we have a 1.94% increase in year-over-year expenditures. I believe this is the lowest in maybe since you've been here, Brandon. There's a story behind this, and we'll get to this later on. You'll see debt service has increased some 20%. This is on the back of the communication system, mostly, but also the Board of Ed Annex building. We're also closing out debt service, or paying the final installments, I guess, of debt service for the library. Capital projects, you see capital projects are actually down year over year, 5%. All in all, this comes to a 2.41% increase over last year's budget. That is an incredibly small increase. As I said, there's a reason for this, and we'll get to that a little later. Next slide. You'll see the special revenue funds. These are all, so special revenue funds are special funds that we have that have their own funding source that's not tax driven. All right, so if you look down this list, you'll see sewers. Sewers are a special revenue funds paid for by sewer fees. Likewise, all these other ones, Fisher Meadows has income, I think, from recreation and parks fees, but also some historical funding. Bottom line is, this is down 13% year over year, but this has no effect on the tax change for this year. If you go to the next slide, please. So ultimately, this all comes down to our mission statement, our strategic objectives. It's our mission at the town of Avon to provide quality town services at a reasonable cost to all of our citizens and our taxpayers, maintaining capital budget funding levels with an emphasis on road improvements and public facilities. We aim to continue to adequately fund long-term liabilities, the pension and other post-employment benefits. And we continue to focus on providing core government services, including public safety, education, social services, as well as integrating private vendor contracts for services when efficient and effective. Next slide, please. Here you see some pictures of some great pictures from around Avon the last year. Top left, you'll see the VFW marching in the Memorial Day Parade. We do provide some funding to help with the parade, as well as many other community events around town. Top right, you see Sycamore Hills. I think many families here, myself included, spend a lot of time at Sycamore Hills over the summer. Bottom left, we have the volunteer fire department. The volunteer fire department, in large part, is funded by a grant from the town year over year. And in the bottom right, you'll see just various volunteers from the Bike Walk Avon group, and there's even Councilman Weber right in the middle with the biggest pair of scissors we have in Avon. What I like about this slide, though, is it shows volunteers in just about every one of these images. It's incredibly important to have healthy volunteerism in town. This helps to lower taxpayer burden to those in town. There's no better way to connect to your town than through volunteerism. So I would encourage everyone here to consider volunteering in some way. Next slide, please. So this is the Town of Avon annual budget process. Every year we kind of hit the reset button and go through this cycle again. Starting all the way in number 1, September, all the operating budget forms get sent to the department heads. If you keep working your way all the way around, right now we're here in April. This is the Board of Finance public hearing. We'll have the budget workshop on Wednesday, and the result of that budget workshop will be recommending a budget at the annual town meeting, which will then go to referendum. Really, the point of this slide is that, again, we work on this all year round. It's a year-round process. If you go to the next slide, please. So even though it's a year-long process, this is a year-long process that's heavily dependent upon prior year's decisions and external pressures. There are many things that can affect the decisions that we make this year, including unfunded capital projects from previous years. They increase in scope and cost as maintenance is delayed. We have an example of that this year. You'll see when we get to capital projects, we have the phase 3 of the high school roofs that has grown in cost. We put this off last year in a way to get the budget down so that we could get a budget passed with all the revaluation issues we were having. It's come back this year, as they tend to do, and it's more expensive than it was last year. We have a second bullet on here is the use of non-tax revenue, cash, to offset spending. This leaves a shortfall in the revenue the next year, right? So last year, we spent $1.25 million to pay down some of the budget, some expenditures in order to get the mill rate increase lowered. The problem is when we use that cash, we then need to make up for it the next year. We haven't paid for it yet. We've paid for it with a one-time revenue the year before. We need to raise taxes in order to pay for those extra expenditures. And then we have the extra expenditures for the next year on top. That's also an issue that we're dealing with this year. We have over-reliance on variable funding sources like interest income to support budgets that can leave shortfalls when those revenues shrink. That's a big consideration this year when we have interest income budgeted at a higher value than we've ever budgeted at before. And obviously at the federal level, we have a huge amount of volatility in the markets. And who knows how that's going to play out as far as our interest income is concerned. Finally, we have changes to laws that can require additional funding to keep the town in compliance. This year, we had a few laws changed. I think Houston's going to go into more detail on that actually lowered the grand list and will require an increase in mill rate just to pay for services that we had last year. So all in all, with all these offsets, it would have taken us a 3% increase just to pay for the expenditures we had last year. This is without layering on new expenses from this year. This is why all of the previous slides have shown a very low percent increase in expenditures. We're trying to preserve services while accounting for all of these challenges from previous years and from the legislature. So if you go to the next slide. So this is just a quick overview of what was funded this year and what wasn't funded. I think a lot of times people see the budget comes before them and they don't realize a lot of things have been cut out already by the time they're seeing it. This budget does maintain existing staffing levels at the town, on the town side. We do have IT improvements we have to make to maintain this secure cyber environment. We have, early election, early voting requirements from the and really offerings that we need to support with funding. So this is staffing and equipment related to early voting. We also have maintenance of existing social services programs. The Lunches for Seniors is a specific example of that. And then, of course, there's always maintenance of the public spaces and facilities, the capital budget. And what wasn't funded, we had almost $1 million in requests in just an operating budget. This is not even the capital budget that were not included in what is being presented to you today. $480,000 from department heads, including $279,000 from the library for a full-time librarian in the children's and teen services, and also additional part-time hours for the police records and fire prevention and recreation. There's also $203,000 requests, $203,000 requests in services, supplies, and equipment across all the departments that were not funded. So the next slide will show general fund capital budget. So this year our capital budget's $4,567,000. This funding is allocated to prioritize and maintain the community's capital assets. These are our roads, 112 miles of local roads, 100,000 square feet of interior building space, 64,000 linear feet of sidewalks, over 1,000 acres of open space, 172 vehicles, equipment, and apparatus, 28 miles of trails, 14 parks and greens, 64 athletic fields, 2 swimming pools, and 5 schools. Next slide, please. So out of this capital budget, what was funded, you'll see, as usual, our largest expense is the roads, like keeping up with our pavement management plan. This, I would say, like this 1.8 million is adequate funding. This is the recommended funding from Beta, our pavement management group. We've been able to meet this amount for the last 4 years or so. This has historically been a challenge. 4 years ago, I think we were talking about having to go into debt, secure bonds to pay for the road improvements. We've been fortunate to have really a lot of grant funding and interest income come in that's helped us stay on top of the road improvements, and we aim to keep that going forward to keep us from having to go to debt for this. Second item on the list, you'll see the Sperry Park field construction. This is adding the softball field. There's a big project over at Sperry Park, you probably noticed, adding a softball field over there. There's an equity element to this, but also what's nice about this project is we have considerable grant funding coming in from the state, as well as a Little League putting up money to help, as well as the three-legged stool of the community to help support that project. We have $250,000 in senior center improvements. You probably noticed some necessary improvements walking in, but also I think we have some kitchen renovation going on. We have $100,000 for the plan of conservation and development. This is a requirement for us to update this every so many years, 10 years, I believe. This is that year. Country Club Road reconstruction. This is $50,000 in architectural and design work. As you know, we have a big grant fund. The town has secured a large grant promise for the reconstruction of Country Club, including some connectivity improvements on it. $180,000 for the Avon High School partial roof replacement. This is what I was mentioning before. This was something that we were hoping to have taken care of last year, but it has since grown in cost quite a bit because we were not able to take care of it last year. And that's just typical of how these capital projects go if you put them off. And then there's several others on here. The Avon Middle School notification system replacement, the middle school door entrance on the entrance floor, electrical upgrades, security upgrades, and then some track repair for the high school. We also have police vehicles being funded. We have Tanker 20. I think this is an installment or a yearly payment. We have a few more years before that's fully funded for that replacement. We have Avon Police Department body and dash cameras being replaced this year, Board of Ed dump trucks, and various other capital projects. We also, the last one on here is the Tillotson Bridge replacement. This has been on the list for a while. $660,000 for the replacement of the bridge over by Fisher Meadow and Tillotson. Next slide, please. And of course, that's only a subset of what we could be paying for and probably should be paying for. But in order to keep things affordable, this is a list of items that were not funded this year. I'm not going to go through them all, but you'll probably, I imagine everybody in this room looks at this list and sees something that they might care more about than somebody else. They're all things that are needed, and we just, can't afford to do it. It's $2.84 million in unfunded requests. And these will be there next year, and they'll cost even more. Next slide, please. All right, so general fund debt service budget. This is, this reflects expenditures made by the town for principal and interest on our short and long-term debt. Some of these have been around for a while. The public library renovations and the high school track, turf field and track. So this is I think this is the first year that the communication system comes online here. It's worth noting that the communication system is active now. Our emergency service providers are able to use this. It's a huge improvement. It was a great investment. It's time to pay for it now. We also have acquisitions of the various properties, Board of Ed, Annex Building, the 200 Fisher Drive, but also the property next to the senior center right here that is on debt service for this year as well. So again, this is around $3.5 million, and that represents about a 20% increase over last year. Next slide, please. So what does this proposed budget do? This prioritizes core government services like public safety, education, infrastructure. We're aiming to maintain existing service levels in the face of negative pressures from last year's use of cash and general grand list challenges. We're aiming to meet our long-term financial obligations. This budget does meet the town's most pressing needs and includes very few nice-to-haves. Every year I get up here and I say this is a very minimal budget, a maintenance budget. This year's beyond that. This is less than a maintenance budget. We need to get a budget through, and we have a lot of challenges we're trying to address at the same time from previous years. This budget also anticipates a very low positive expenditure variance at year end. So every year, we would put a lot of effort into trying to project what the expenditures are going to be, but there's also effort into projecting what the revenues are going to be. This year, we have increased projected revenues beyond anything we've ever done before. And it's all happening at a time with a lot of uncertainty at the federal level. There's a little bit of risk here, but it's worth pointing out that this is another lever we're pulling in trying to get the mill rate into a controlled and manageable increase. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is, what additional reductions are on the table. There really aren't very good options left. These ones listed are, ones that do not impact core service delivery and risk mitigation, but they will affect the ability of the town to provide services to you and the efficiency of the town's services. We discussed these in one of our town council meetings, and this is probably what's going to go away if this budget doesn't pass. We have wages and benefits for a full-time patrol officer. We're carrying funding for an extra patrol officer with anticipation of perhaps one retiring this year. This funds one of the patrol officers who's just come up through the academy. We have wages and benefits for part-time library staff. We would be able to reduce those wages and benefits if we close the library a little bit earlier at 8 p.m. And then also get rid of the Sundays in the winter and Saturdays in the summer. There's also funding for the senior center lunch program. I think one specific day of the week. These are not good options for reduction, and that's why they're not included in the budget. But frankly, these are the options if the budget doesn't pass. So I hope we don't get to that point. This is only $263,000 worth of expenditures, which is pretty minimal. But as you can see, these are things that could all have an outsized impact on town services. Next slide, please. All right, so every year about this time, we start seeing the social media posts about, how the politicians in Avon and leadership in Avon is just doing money grabs and trying to push Avon taxes into some higher place than anywhere else in the region. I got curious about this, started looking into the numbers myself. This is pulled straight from from the ct.gov website. What this is percent change in tax levy from 2020. So tax levy, this is the combined property tax levy as well as your car tax. And what this shows is a percent change from 2019-2020 fiscal year. The dashed red line is Avon. And you see we're about 15% higher than we were in 2020, 15% change in tax levy. Tax levy, again, is the total amount of revenue collected by the town to pay for the budget. Total amount of revenue collected in taxes by the town to pay for the budget. So what you see here is, out of all the towns in the region, Avon, Farmington, Granby, Simsbury, West Hartford, Canton, Glastonbury, Rocky Hill, South Windsor, we are very near the bottom. All right, next slide. This is just a slightly different way of looking at this. This is the year-over-year tax levy change. So rather than compare it back to the 2020 fiscal year, this is what's the percent change from the year before. You see a little bit more volatility in this. But one thing I want to, I guess two things I want to call out. First of all, you'll see Avon again is usually at worst in the middle, usually towards the bottom of this list. The other thing I want to point out is the two times we had big drawdowns in unassigned fund balance or cash to offset expenditures. If you look at 2020, 2021, that was a pandemic year. We used a good bit of cash to get down to a 0% or close to 0%. What you see the year after that, 2021, 2022, is you see a big spike up to a 5% increase because we had to pay for all the expenditures that were essentially kicked down the road by using cash in the 21-22 fiscal year. So there's a story there, right? We used cash last year to get down to, to get to the 24-25 year. We're down at a 1% last year. The 1% change in the tax levy last year. 1% additional revenue taken in by the town in the form of property taxes and car taxes. We're at the very bottom there. Likewise, you should just kind of expect that this year is one of those years where we need to kind of pay for kicking the can down the road a little bit. So if you go to the next slide, please. The final comparison here is just comparing Avon versus inflation. So this is the consumer price index in blue, Avon's in red. This is an incredibly high bar. Trying to beat the consumer price index, trying to beat inflation as a service provider, where we pay contracts, inflation-adjusted contracts to all of our service providers as well as our employees. It's just naturally just an incredibly hard thing to do to stay below inflation. I think a lot of this story, we've been able to do this by prudent use of grant funding. I wouldn't expect it to stay like this forever. And you can kind of see most towns kind of hovering around above the inflation, but Avon has done incredibly well to stay below inflation over the past 5 years. Okay, next slide. All right, so now, here we are. The budget's a set of choices. Now is the time to make decisions regarding the community that we want to be. This is a highly desirable area, of the entire country, really, to live in. We have a high quality of life here. You don't need to look much further than the housing market to see how desirable it is. Houses in Avon go up one weekend, off the market the next weekend. This desirability is substantiated by third-party assessments like Niche. Niche is rated as the number 7 town in Connecticut. There's a cost associated with this. There's a cost associated with being a nice place to live. Do we continue to aspire to be a premier location in Avon? Now, again, is when we make the call. Next slide, please. So finally, there are many ways to stay in the loop. We are kind of in the process of doing an overhaul of the webpage, so that should be a more pleasant experience sometime in the near future. But please go to the website, subscribe to the different email updates. You pick the ones that you're particularly interested in. We're on Facebook. There are all kinds of ways to stay on top of the news and stay in touch with the town. So thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it, and I hope we'll have your support at the budget and at the referendum.
All right, and so we won't call the Board of Finance up just to leave again. So Superintendent Bridget Carnemola, would you like to come up? And I'm told we have your presentation started and ready to, shall we say, rock and roll.
I always struggle with my height in this thing, but I just want to take an opportunity to thank everyone for coming. I'm Deb Shute. I am the chair of the Board of Education, and it's my privilege and honor to be able to introduce our board members as well as our superintendent. So I just wanted to recognize that we do have our vice chair, Dr. Thej Singh. We have our secretary, Jeff Fleischman, Lynn Katz, Sarah Heath, Suzanne Zakaris, Chris Campbell, Nicole Russo, and Ramesh Kandapilli. We are very grateful for the work that the team of Dr. Carnemola does in order to prepare this for you. Dan wasn't lying when he said this is a year-long budget process. As soon as one budget goes through, we begin the task of the next year's budget. And so we're incredibly grateful, and we appreciate how tirelessly they have worked. We've had many meetings on our end to bring to you a lean and responsible budget. So we are appreciative of our business manager, Susan Russo, and it's my honor to introduce to you our superintendent, Dr. Bridget Heston Carnemola.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. Told me it was a new microphone and I got nervous about that. Thank you, Deb, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the budget on behalf of the Board of Education. This is the Board of Education approved budget, as Deb mentioned. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. These are certainly not all of the accomplishments over the past year from when I stood here and talked about the budget last year, but I'd like to start with a little bit of good news, and we see these as accomplishments that we've made together. It's the school district, it's the town, it's the parents, it's the community that comes together. It's not only a function of the school district, clearly, to have students do as well as they do, but nonetheless, just highlight a few things because we think about where does the money go in terms of services and goals and accomplishments. We had 12 students receive National Merit commendations this year. There are many high schools in the United States that receive none. A few other things, won't read them all to you, but we were very excited about our music department being named nationally recognized one of the best communities for music education. That was a long process for them to be recognized, and we were very proud of that. Also, our Avon School robotics team, again, competing in the national competition. And this was a first for us, I believe. Certainly it was a first for me as an educator in general. We had a student recognized as a finalist in the John Locke Essay Contest, which is a national contest that takes place. We were able to recognize that young man at a board meeting earlier this year, and it was just fantastic to hear how his journey to Oxford and to be recognized even as a finalist was huge. If you go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. So we'll start at the end, I guess, and work backwards at this point. This is where we are. I would like to point out that you'll see different numbers here than are on the town published materials. And that is because our Board of Education got together and met again in March and further reduced the budget after it was turned in to the town. As you know, the budget cycle starts very early, and in theory, it starts a year before, really in some ways more than that even, but it has to be approved by the board and turned into the town by typically the first Friday in February. And very often during that time, obviously, there still can be some changes. And with the way we were working on this budget this year, clearly there were more that we wanted to make before we got here tonight. And so apologies that the number is different, but it went down to be more lean, if you will. If you go to the next slide for me, please. Just a reminder, I know Dan showed how it goes on the town side. On the board side, we start with our principals and our department heads answering two questions. What are the top priorities in this budget, and how do they support our strategic plan? And we begin meeting with department heads and principals as an entire team in October. Over the next few months, we go back and forth about that, trying to get updates on other expenditures, for example, insurance, which typically does not come in as a projection, even at this point. Sometimes it's still a projection until later. But nonetheless, we go back and forth with what we really need and what we can try to reduce. We finally met with the Board of Education 3 times before we discuss in committee meetings before we discuss the budget. At the board meeting in January, we had a workshop. We went to the next board meeting on the 21st, and that was when they initially adopted the budget. And fast forward, you see on the bottom, they revised that budget subsequently at our meeting on March 25th. If you could go to the next for me, please. Tried to keep this very short and sweet, so to speak, this year, because mostly what there is to talk about, honestly, are the reductions that we made. So we wanted to stay in that lane of what the drivers were and what the reductions were before we got here, because we didn't add anything new into this budget. See in front of you where we started just initially knowing what would drive the budget, the benefits cost, the increase $995,260. That's the increase. Just for a point of reference, 1% of the budget is about approximately $698,000. So that benefit number, which represents all benefits, generally speaking, increasing. It's health insurance, increase $837,320. It's workers' compensation, estimates rising, dental insurance increase, and also, as you can see, even Social Security, pension, annuities, disability, pension, which is not teacher pension. I always have to make that distinguish there, because we're talking about pensions that no longer exist in the town of Avon, but there are people that are still grandfathered in and or are still collecting. So there are changes to those in actuarial cost and values. Our tuition, our transportation went up $137,487, mostly due to the contractual increase, which is actually a lot lower than many other communities because of the contract that was negotiated. It's about a 1.41% increase for the 25-26 year, and an estimate on the increased cost for tuitions for students at specialized outplacements. Those outplacements are for students who we are unable to program for at a certain point. Very oftentimes, they could be medical issues, they could be more severely impacted students with special needs that even our special needs programming can't manage. And so at some point, there are probably about 28 students at this point, I believe, district-wide that are in specialized outplacements. And of course, they have put their tuition up like everything else has gone up. Contracted services, we're very often asked about this. What does that mean? Why aren't we taking care of everything in-house? There are numerous things that qualify as contracted services that we are not able to cover in-house. And I'll give you some examples. Police and fire at games, at athletic games, for example, those are contracted services. Ambulances, the athletic trainer that you must have by law, that's one of the things you can see. The contract there went up. It went up statewide, unfortunately. I think that was about $43,000 of this increase. So it's not an enormous part of the $417,000, but approximately 10% of this increase was due just to athletic trainer services. Increased needs and costs for students with special needs, increased costs related to speech and language pathologists, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all of those have increased. And one of the largest pieces that was really unanticipated is the last one that you see there, substitute service fees increasing. As you know, first, the Connecticut minimum wage was raised, but not only that, the legislature passed a law that has impacted all of us for Connecticut, the Paid Sick Leave Act. And that has been one of the drivers here also. It happened mid-year. It went into effect in January, something we couldn't have projected forward in the budget. And now we are projecting it forward into the coming year, assuming it won't be repealed at this point. If it is, that would be great. And I say that not because we don't believe that people should have access to paid sick leave, but because by contract, most employees of the town and the board have access to paid sick leave. And so when the legislature made this change, it impacted everyone regardless of your contracts. Utilities, we've all seen that increase. $100,563 is what we are projecting. Sorry, I skipped one over. Salaries, contractual increases and obligations. These were, again, the initial drivers. You'll see the numbers have changed later, about just shy of $1.8 million. So when we get to the bottom of those initial drivers, we were at a 5.28% increase without anyone asking us for anything different than was in the current budget. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. So clearly, we knew 5.28 was not going to work, never mind putting anything else into it. We, as I said, our main goal as we came out this budget season was to do the best we could to bring the increase down. We went through the process with all of you in the town writ large last year. We heard voters and understood the constraints clearly and worked very hard to try to reduce it as much as we possibly could. I have to pause for a moment, and as Dan explained, that of course meant there were things that we did not or could not do, and everyone won't be happy about what some of the things that were asked for that were cut out. But as you can see, if we had done everything that was asked for in this budget by principals, by department heads, by conversations with the Board of Ed, initially we would have been at a 7.29% increase. That is not reasonable. Some of the things that we took out that were not funded, for example, I'll read you the laundry list of them because there's a number of them, but just some examples. We put off the athletic uniforms again another year. We pushed them back 1 year for track, basketball, cheerleading, and crew. We reduced our software contract for Meraki, which is our secure Wi-Fi access points that we have to maintain. We had originally put in for a 5-year contract because in the long run, if you contract for 5 years, you actually save money, but that costs more money in the short run. So we took that down to a 1-year contract. In the long run, that will most likely cost us more, but we were able to cut $49,520 out of this budget. There was an audiovisual project we had planned to do at Pine Grove Elementary School in the gymnasium. That would have been $29,754. We put that off. We took $38,100 out of maintenance supplies. Instructional supplies, when you go through the line by line, you would say, well, Bridget, there's an increase in supplies. Yes, overall, you'll see an increase, but that's due to the rising costs, not because we've increased what we are asking for. We've actually decreased the instructional supply lines, what we're actually purchasing, by $18,293, but the prices of everything keep rising. So that said, those are some of the things we took out and did not pay for. Can you go back one sec? Sorry, because the real money is actually still up there. That's just a portion of what we did not do. We reduced the coming year by 7.8 total positions. You can see those broken down up here. If you saw the initial budget that came through, this is where it was a little bit different. You've heard me talk in previous years, we had an increase in preschool enrollment and we needed to add a section of preschool. We are now back down to where we were, so we are reducing a section of preschool. That nets 3 positions because it's a teacher and 2 paraeducators that are a part of every preschool classroom. So 1 preschool teacher, 2 full-time paraeducator positions. The technology education, we had been unable to fill the position in the current year. And so we took it out for next year after going back through enrollment, redoing scheduling. We hadn't been able to hire a person anyway, so we reduced it for the time being. In most likely the coming year, I would expect that we may be putting it back due to what the enrollment will look like at the middle school and the need. This was supposed to be a teacher split between the middle school and the high school. So that has been reduced from this coming year budget also. Wellness position, we looked at sectioning and the enrollment, and we were able to reduce 1 full-time wellness teacher. That position we had been watching as it was in the previous year and spoke to the individual about it too, knowing that if the enrollment did not shift in 5 to 12 this year, we would not need it. So we've reduced that in the coming year with these projections. Social studies, again, we looked at enrollment in the section structures and made a decrease of a 0.8 social studies position. In the elementary, this is where you would see the difference. So in our original Board of Education budget, we had 1 full-time elementary teacher that we had reduced based on the section sizes. But at that point, we were still waiting, and we still are waiting. Kindergarten registrations come in right up until the first day and sometimes the first week of school. But we feel we're in a better position to project them forward now. We've put some procedures into place over the last couple of years that have been helpful with this also, including surveying parents when they register 1 child to see how many they have at home and what ages they are, so we can project forward what kindergarten numbers might be. And right now, we are confident in the way the numbers are trending that we will be able to reduce another section. So that's what we brought back to the board in March. And that's why you see 2 full-time elementary teacher positions instead of 1, as was original. So when we were done with those salary reductions, that was just shy of $692,000. That would be equal a 0.99% increase to the overall budget. The rest of the reductions, some of which I just mentioned, that actually this should not say that. This is not. This $1.4 million, these are the rest of the actual reductions. This is going through line by line and taking out some of the budget requests that I just mentioned, but also taking things out of the budget that had already existed. We brought it down another 2.02%. So here we are after the March meeting at 4.29. And do we recognize that that is still 4.29 and not 0, as I'm certain as taxpayers we might want it to be? Yes, but you can see the amount that we have reduced. In some ways, we've actually, as I already said, made some folks more unhappy than not, because it's hard to call it, it's a little bit less than a maintenance budget, as Dan said. So I've been asked what we're doing to continue to grow and to innovate and so forth. And my answer to that would be that we are doing the best we can to use what we already have, making the best use of grant funds that we can. For example, many of you may already know this, another state law that was changed that requires us to have an approved state, a reading program approved by the state, for example. That is a huge cost to districts that did not already have one that ended up on their list of programs. And we are utilizing grant funds at the end of this year to begin that purchasing. And we've worked out payment plans with the company over the next 3 years to try to finish paying for it. So that number is actually not even in this budget, but it is one of the things we do have to put forward next year. If you could just go to the next one for me. We just have a few more for the visual people, just try to show a few other ways of looking at this. This salary increase after making these reductions is actually the lowest it's been in years. The overall budget is clearly less than it was last year. The increase, I should say, to the overall budget is less than it was last year. But this represents a 2.46 reduction in salaries. This is the lowest we have seen salaries increase the budget in certainly in the time that I've been here. I'm not sure about how far we can go back with that number. If you could go to the next for me, please. Thank you. Another way of looking at this, as you can see, breaking them out. So 36.99, so we'll say 37% of the budget increase is in salaries. That does make sense. We are a people-driven industry in the school districts. It's mostly people working with students. The rest of it, you can see benefits right up there with salaries, 33.26%. The tuition represents a smaller percentage. We were able to decrease the transportation overall. And one of the ways we did that, I failed to mention as we went past there, was to try to continue to utilize our bus driver that we have in district and the van we have in district as much as possible to drive students to student activities and so forth. We've been pretty successful at doing that. Supplies and equipment, as I mentioned, you see an overall increase of 7.52%, and that's due to the increased costs of things even after reducing the amount that we buy. Utilities, 3.36% of the overall increase, and all other 0.33. In other words, there are some pieces that don't fit exactly into any one of the lines. One of the questions I was asked recently related to the utilities, and I know we discussed as a board also, is whether or not the town and or the board has to pay the increases related to providing service for people that need assistance, the public assistance piece of the bill. And the answer is yes. The Board of Ed utility budget also does include that. If I remember right off the top of my head, we estimated the charge in that in just one of the buildings to equal 30%, a 30% increase in that. So it's another piece of legislation we're hoping changes in the next year. It would help all of us certainly with public budgets, but also at home. If you go to the next slide, I think it's the last one for me. Again, just another way of breaking it out, because we try to make these documents stand on their own when you're not here at a presentation with us, and you can find these online. There are many other documents online. One of the other pieces it's hard to put up on the screen that's often of interest is the enrollment report, because I just told you how many, we did look at the enrollment in the sections. We do that every year and reduce those sections and positions. It's hard to put that on the screen in a way that is readable, however, so I point you to online if you wanted to see that. I believe that is the last one, Tom. Yes. Thank you again. We're happy to answer any questions. Obviously, we did not go line by line. As I said, we were most concerned with presenting to you the ways in which we looked to reduce this budget as much as possible before we came here tonight. So any other questions about what is left in the budget or the like, we're happy to answer. Thank you.
Sure. All right, moving on to the first slide. We basically start off with an empty scale, and we have to budget expenditures because they have to equal revenues. We are not the federal government. We can't run at a deficit. So that's what we do. We back into the budget increase by coming up with an estimated series of expenditures. So going to the general operating fund, which is the general thing, let me just say that I'm sure everybody knows all this, but the Board of Finance handles the finances for the town. So if anything moves from budget line to budget line, the Board of Finance has to approve it. The Board of Education has a lot more autonomy. They can, we can tell them what their budget is. They have to decide how to spend it. Now, they also have a penalty that no one else has, is that if they go through their budget, they're all personally liable for the amount that they blow through the budget. So therefore, they are extraordinarily careful in terms of coming up with the budget. There is a minimum by the state as to how much you have to provide everybody for the Board of Education. That is, we always exceed that. So the general operating fund, a third is the town, roughly, and 2/3 is the Board of Education, roughly. And that's the way it's been since time immemorial. The increase for the town is about 2%, and the increase for the Board of Ed is about 4.51%. So when you get done with everything, that's about 3.75%. Debt service, we do have debt service. We've issued some bonds. Some of them you know the projects, some of them you may not know the projects. One, the communication system, that was bonded out. Two, the purchase of 200 Fisher Meadow. Apparently, and I know that this is going to be a surprise to a number of you, a building built in the time of slightly after Abraham Lincoln, but Andrew Johnson, no one remembers who Andrew Johnson was. That would be the old Topaz School. After 150 years, we've gotten as much out of it as we can, so therefore we came up and purchased 200 Fisher Drive. We think we got a very good deal for it, but that's also covered by the debt service. So the fund balance assignment, we have increased by roughly 26%. So let's see, switching, capital projects, general fund only capital projects. Sometimes capital projects are in the general fund if they're small enough. If they are not small enough, they go to the capital projects budget. So the property tax levy dropped this year, 18%. And the fund balance assignment increased slightly, 26%, but we're still minus. We've still dropped, and putting my bifocals in position, 5.5%. Special revenue funds, we have an assortment of funds that are what we call special revenue. Sewer, capital projects, and education. Those are all listed on the slide here, and we can go over them in detail in the question period if you'd like to. There's nothing worse than reading numbers, trust me. It may be the cure for insomnia. The proposed budget summary for all budgeted funds, the general fund subtotal 3.77%, special revenue subtotal decreases by 9.76%. So the overall grand total is 2.87%. Going back to the scales. Now that we've estimated what the total expenditures will be, $118,782,594, and I must admit I'm still naive enough that I feel a cold flush every time I see a number that large, because how did one of the senators say, 1 million here, 1 million there, pretty soon it adds up to real money. So this is what we anticipate spending. This is with a relatively tight budget. But we need to get revenues to balance that out. So flipping to the next one, non-tax revenues. So we've got, if any of you have bought a pass to use the landfill, you know you paid for it. So this includes all sorts of recreations, fees, things like that. Intergovernmental grants, sometimes we get some, sometimes we don't. An example of one we didn't get this year is in the past, we have exceeded the cap on property tax on motor vehicles. Okay, nice. And what happens is the state of Connecticut sends us money. And they said, guess what? You get about $800,000. This year, we didn't exceed the cap. So that was $800,000 we don't get. Other local revenue, interest income, licenses, permits, fees, that's also increased a little bit. Taxes and assessments. So the overall estimate of non-tax levy revenue will be dropped about 3.13%. So therefore, once we take those particular sources into account, we have to say, okay, how much are we going to make on property taxes? Now, the amount of the property tax grand list, which is a sum total of the value of all the property we have in the town of Avon, not just real property, but also personal property for businesses and motor vehicles. That has, in fact, dropped a bit. So you can see that, well, I stand corrected. It's actually gone up a bit this year. So altogether, we need to come up for the property tax levy is 99 million and some change. So what we do is we flip the page. And that shows what the property tax levy will have to be as a percent of revenue. And so we'd have to increase the amount of the property tax by 4.13%. So that will cause, if we flip to the next page, we're balanced, thank goodness. And if you flip 2 pages, how is the mill rate calculated? There you go. We take the 2025, 2026 grand tax levy, divide it by the estimated net grand list times 1,000. That gives us our mill rate. And this is the cure for insomnia. So it comes out being the proposed fiscal year 25-26 mill rate is 31.04. So it's a 4.65 increase. Let's see. When we go to number 16, yep. I'm sorry, Tom, UFB is? Unassigned fund balance. Last year we used the unassigned fund balance of about $1.25 million. So while we took that money and used it to reduce the tax impact last year, we're not doing, and we replenished it. I want to be very clear. We replenished it in the unassigned fund balance. We still have to make up an extra roughly $1.25 million, or exactly $1.25 million because we borrowed that effectively on our credit card and we repaid it immediately. So this year we have to pay more. Motor vehicles, they changed the way that motor vehicles are assessed. It used to be they went to the Blue Book and they said, I'm going to show my age. That's a 1980 Dodge. The value of it is $4,000. It doesn't work that way anymore. So what happens is they changed it slightly. They said, okay, it's going to be 85% of the manufacturer's list price. Then they changed their mind and said, no, it's 90%. So that decreased us motor vehicle valuation. And then, as I said before, because we are not charging enough, we did not charge enough on motor vehicles. We are not getting the subsidy from the state to the tune of roughly $800,000, as I mentioned before. And unfunded mandates by the state of Connecticut, lo and behold, if they tell you to do something, they don't always give you the money to do it. So that's roughly another 190,000. All right, reasons for the mill rate. We have the, let's see, new general fund revenue required for the fiscal year. So those are the numbers that we needed to come up with. New revenue to reach with the spending, so that's the $2,800,000. And then new revenue to reach the 25-26 spending, that's another $4 million. So as you can see, that gets us up to the total of $111 million and some change. All right, flipping over to the next one. And I think this is the last one. The way this works is on Wednesday, we have the budget workshop. It's not really for public participation, but you get to watch the sausage being made, which usually, as I say, is not terribly fun to watch. It's the three boards meet together and they sit and discuss. Sometimes we take questions if we have time. But it's not intended to be a night like tonight. Then we have the annual budget meeting when there will be a proposed budget. And people will get up and say, I like this budget because fill in the blank. I don't like this budget because fill in the blank. If it depends upon who moderates it, but if we moderate it and you ask a question, we will do our best to answer it, assuming the moderator, who is not me, does that. Then we have the budget referendum. I know, isn't it nice to know that I don't run everything? The budget referendum, which is May 14th. So that concludes our presentation for this evening. But the point of this meeting is not the presentations. Yes, they're interesting. Yes, they're informative. Yes, you need to know. But the point of this is to have you get up and ask questions. You can make a comment of, geez, I think you've underestimated the importance of blank. We should fund that more or better. Got it. Or I don't like what you did over here. You funded it too much. That's fine too. And as I said, you can applaud politely, but no boos, no hisses. And if you've got a question, tonight is the night to ask the question because we have people here who can answer it. Sometimes I can answer it. I assume most of the time I won't be able to, so we'll have other people answer it. So if you would like to line up for the auditorium by the podium, and we also have 39 people online, and if people would like to ask questions online, that's fine too. So does anyone, I figured I'd start with the live people. Does anyone want to be the first live person? Come on up, there's the podium. Speak into the microphone so that everybody can hear you. And we have to require name and address. They tell me it works.
I don't know if I have.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So one correction, it's not necessarily correction. The slides that you showed today show a 4.6% increase to the mill rate.
Right.
So we had a special meeting last week. One of the big drivers of that Houston discussed was that there was changes in legislature that determine how your car is assessed, right? You're not assessed by the Blue Book value anymore. There's a set depreciation schedule. When the legislature set that depreciation schedule, they gave towns a choice of going with two different levels. Either like you start at the 90% depreciation or you start at 85%. It just so happens if you start at 90%, it makes this year's car tax levy more comparable to last year's car tax levy. We decided to go that route. So your car tax is going to vary from person to person, but overall the town is collecting about the same amount of car tax as we did last year. The effect that has on property is the mill rate increase is actually a 3.7% increase. It's not a 4.7% increase. So that's what you'll see on all the materials that go out, the newsletter and whatever. Again, so your property tax increase, the mill rate increase is a 3.7x%. Your car taxes, it just depends on the kind of car you have.
Thank you. And I apologize for not having our slides updated. That was an oversight on mine. Would someone like to talk or ask a question online? Going once.
Yes, this is John Tinderella calling from 15 Mountain Laurel Lane here in Avon. And first of all, I'd like to say, for someone who's worked with budgets for well over 30 years, I appreciate the hard work and diligence that went into preparing them. But my question has more to do with the approval process. Last year, the townspeople of Avon voted down your budget and it was passed anyway. So what good is our participation?
Well, I agree with you that the town voted down the budget process 3 times. Now, let me explain, generally speaking, how the approval process works. The Board of Finance puts forth a proposed budget. It is then sent to the town, where it's then sent out for a referendum. Happens once. If less than 9% of the people vote, it is deemed approved. So if you want to take down the budget, you need to make sure you get 9% of the people appearing and voting, and a majority have to vote no. If less than 9% of the people show up, the answer is it passes. Then, if it fails, it goes back to the Board of Finance. Once again, comes up with a budget, and then puts it forward, goes out to referendum. It can be voted up or down. And if it gets voted down, once again, the same rules apply. At least 9% have to vote. If it gets voted down, then it goes out one more time. And same rules apply. If it gets voted down 3 times, like it did last year, the answer is the town council sets the budget in their infinite wisdom, because you need a budget. There has to be an ending point. So if your question is somewhat cynical, why am I bothering to participate when it can be set without my input? The answer is, we always pay attention to the voting. We realize there has to be a budget. We also recognize that we can't come up with no taxes for services, because that just doesn't fly. But I would urge you to come out and to speak in favor of the budget or against the budget. And then also, another answer is, run for local office. We need people to help represent the people we are elected to serve. So if you want to run for Board of Finance, if you want to run for Board of Ed, we'd love to have your input. Just because it gets voted down doesn't mean you haven't said something worthwhile. It means simply that it was a democracy and you didn't prevail. So well, it's true. We all signed up for this, the majority vote. And, there has to be a process. So we do want you to participate. We do want you to ask questions. You asked a fair question. And so I wanted to make sure I answered it. And if you support the budget, great. If you don't support the budget, that's also fine. But do stay engaged because your participation is important. Next question. Do we have someone else? Come forward, young lady, and give us your name and your address.
Lisa Seminara, 605 Deercliff Road. So I just had a question regarding the unassigned fund balance. It's a little confusing to me because if we borrow the money and we already paid it back, why do we need to fund it again?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but let me try and answer it. We've paid it back, so the unassigned fund balance is in fact where it should be and where we want to keep it so we can keep our municipal bond ratings because we're rated by Moody's and we've got a pretty good rating. But what we have to do is, it's like if someone gave you a gift to balance your household budget one year and then they took it away the next year. You still, unless you're going to knock your budget down, you still need to make up that lost source of income. So we're not saying we're replenishing the unassigned fund balance. What we are saying is because we're not using those funds anymore, that we have to make up that source of loss of funds. And you're looking at me like I didn't explain your question, so therefore go ahead.
Well, you said, or I don't know if it was you, but someone said earlier that we had an unassigned fund balance. We used it.
Correct.
We paid it back.
Correct.
And now you're saying we have to fund it again. And
No.
I'm not exact. Yep, that's what was said, that we
No.
have to fund it again.
No, what we're saying is the source of, it's not that we're putting more money into the unassigned fund balance. We are saying that the unassigned fund balance paid for something last year. That source of revenue is not available this year.
But you paid it back. So why-
I understand. Well, the answer is, are we going to go raid the unassigned fund balance again? And that would probably raise some concerns by the rating agencies. So every year you try to replenish it. Yeah, sure, we could probably, that's a high risk proposition. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if I'm still understanding it, but I will try to talk to people privately to try to clarify this, because if we already funded it back,
Right.
we already paid it back,
Correct. We've already paid it back.
I'm not sure why we're funding it again.
We're not funding it again.
Okay.
We're not.
Okay, but that's what was said.
I understand,
Okay.
but it's a loss of source of revenue.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, someone else online?
Yes, Neil Rudolph.
Good evening. This is Neil Rudolph. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Rudolph.
25 Red Mountain Lane. Two things. One, I'd like to make just a slight correction to what was said just before. There were 3 budget referendums, but the budget that was passed was not the last budget. It was the one that was previous to that, which was a higher amount. Just for the record, I'd like that put on the record.
Oh, that's true. That's what the town council passed.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second point,
You have another point. All right, go ahead.
on your budget drivers, there's about $1 million in health insurance and special education costs. On the health insurance, is there any wiggle room with that? For instance, I looked at your contracts for the administrators and the teachers, and the Board of Ed funds between 80 to 82% of the healthcare costs, and the balance is picked up by the employees. Can that be changed to bring down the cost of that increase?
That would be a subject of contract negotiation, because that is in fact put into the contracts.
Yes,
So
I
those
I
things I can tell you are hard fought every year when a contract comes up.
I don't know what other towns do, but that seems, that's a big nut for the town, $837,000. That seems to be a large cost increase.
I would agree that health insurance is expensive, that we in fact, as a practical matter, run our own insurance company. So what happens is we have a manager that manages the claims for us. We have stop loss policies. So if anyone gets catastrophically ill, that gets covered by insurance. Those amounts are set every year in consultation with our actuaries. And particularly for Board of Ed, when they negotiate a contract, the background for it is other municipalities within the state of Connecticut. So even if we're first, they will tend to take a look at what other districts are doing. If we're last, they really don't want to move from what other districts have done. So I can tell you those are hard-fought negotiations.
Well, the administrator's contract is due next year, I believe. And maybe that's something that should be looked at. I guess the teacher's contract is already signed and sealed for this year.
I'd have to ask Dr. Carmelo. Come on up, and you have to grab the microphone, because while we can hear you wonderfully here, he can't hear you.
Good evening. Thank you for the question. So the board and the negotiations team at the district do work every year on our contracts to negotiate them. I see many of our teachers here and our union representative here. For our teachers contract next year, there was movement, and there was a negotiated increase to the teacher contribution, a negotiated decrease to the Board of Ed liability. We do that as a part of our negotiations when we work with every one of our union groups. And we look at that and move that forward even to our non-union collective employees. In terms of the health insurance costs, we are very competitive in terms of the percentage that the district bears versus the percentage that the employee bears across all of our employee groups. We're very competitive, and that's something when we're working with the attorneys and working with the negotiations, particularly for a state mandated contract cycle like the teachers and the administrators, we have to go with what is the averages out there. So what the average health insurance cost is, that's what we look at before we head to mediation or arbitration. So we're always very fiscally responsible when we're negotiating those contracts, and we're also trying to be as frugal as we can be when we do that. We have HSA incentives, which are HSA plans, which are less costly than a typical Blue Cross Blue Shield plan or a PPO plan. And we try to offset costs whenever we can.
Could you refresh my memory? We've got teacher contracts, we have administrative contracts, which is a relatively small union. We have paralegal contracts. What else do we have?
Our union is our paraeducators, interventionists, and nutrition service workers are all in an additional union together. We also have our custodians or our maintainers.
Okay, so we've got four major union contracts.
Thank you. Security and safety specialists, as well as our administrative assistants.
So that's six.
Correct.
All right. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, it did.
All right. If you could Next person coming forward? Sure, turn on your microphone.
It has come up a few times, so I want to make sure that we all have a better memory of what happened last year in the votes. The first % increase that we brought to the people for vote, I believe, was a little bit over 3%. The second one was 2.99%. The third one was 0. And I want to remind everybody that we do not know why people vote no or why people vote yes on something. The last one, I myself voted no because I thought it was a step too far. I know many people voted no on that last one because it was a step too far. The town council came back and put a percentage increase of 0.99%. So it was, the town council passed a budget that was never voted on, but a compromise between what the last one was and the one before it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me, Houston?
I can hear you, Jamie.
Very good, very good.
Could you, I know who you are, but could you say your name?
Jamie DePace, Wheeler Road, 51-year member of the Avon Volunteer Fire Department. And I see a whole bunch of folks here who we've got applications for. Chief Appel and Assistant Chief Klein are right here. We're taking names because we need volunteers. We need firefighters, okay? More than anything else, you want to talk about a budget increase, go to a career fire department. And we don't want to do that. So we need volunteers. Talk to your kids, talk to your aunts, uncles, cousins, whomever you need. But we need volunteer firefighters in order to maintain this. But now I'll get off my high horse that way.
But you're absolutely right on that, Jamie.
It is. And you can make sure that the old school gets cleaned out of all the stuff that you left there. Him and I went to school
We
there.
went to high school together. We graduated high school at the same time.
But anyway,
that's why he can make fun of me.
Just to keep this going, I just wanted to make a little light of a few things. But in the fire service, we've worked for years and years, and I was very involved state level, and trying to keep the level of requirements necessary from the state. Is there anything that our state legislators can do to get rid of these unfunded mandates? I don't know what they're worth. I don't know what the total value is of all these unfunded mandates that we have, but something needs to be done with that. They're not giving us anything. They just want more out of our pockets.
Well, then we have to bring that up with our legislators in Hartford.
Well, these are you are the folks that can do that.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. All right. We have someone online. Going once. Going twice. All right. We have someone from the audience. Sir, would you give us your name? Oh, it was on. Yeah, it's on.
My name is Bill Severny, West Avon Road, Avon. First of all, I appreciate the hard work everybody's done. I've sat on the Board of Education. I've been on the town Board of Finance already many years ago, but I've done it. My complaint really has to do with, I'll have a second question, but my complaint is last year. I can appreciate you voted no because you thought it was too much. I can't believe that after 3 votes, the only amount that was reduced was $600,000. That's less than basically 0.5%. I've sat on the boards. I know what negotiations are. I know how tough they are. I know what you have to do. But I find that incredible that that's all there was. And you can disagree and say, yeah, too bad, Bill. But when the votes are so overwhelming, we're not talking about a 55, 40, 45 vote. You got 71-28. That's a mandate from people. So to a degree, I disagree with about a democracy. It's not a democracy. It's an aristocracy. Because people are thinking, we're smarter than the regular people. We're going to do what we want. That's Aristotle. Because Aristotle said the only true democracy was a lottery. where the real people represent everybody. So I have a little bit of a complaint about that. But what's past is past. Had you done more last year, perhaps we wouldn't be facing as much of an increase this year. That's just one man's opinion for what it's worth. I would like for the Board of Education, if you could have like a 5-year spread of the teacher-student ratio, because I think that's really important. When you were saying you're reducing because of student enrollments, and perhaps if that could be, if it's not too much work, to departments, whether it's STEM, whether it's the social sciences, whether it's the music, who participates. It seems to me, one of the things, I was sad to see a social teacher cut. I think one of the things lacking is our students understanding how government works and the responsibility we have. We don't have civics anymore. I bet you asked the kids to name capitals of 20 states, they couldn't do it. That's the problem. I don't have a problem with the Board of Education doing things. Believe me, I'm a strong advocate of it. I was a Democrat on that Board of Education, if you can believe it, and I know you probably don't. I was the only Democrat at the time. But I think those things are important. A great presentation as far as the budget and the efforts from everybody. But I think it's really important to find out where those dollars are going, who's spending them, who's not getting it that really needs them. And I've overspoke my time. I apologize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate what you said. Next gentleman, sorry, I should ask one more time. Anyone else on the remote?
Yes, Gary T.
All right, Gary, could you give us your name and your address? Hello? Gary?
Can you hear me?
Ah, now we can hear you, Gary.
Okay, sorry. I have a couple of questions.
Okay,
One is,
do our best. Bear in mind you got your 3 minutes.
Thank you. I don't know if you have this, if somebody has this in front of them, but I'd like to know what the per student cost is in this budget. No idea how many students there are, but I'd like to know what that is, what we pay to educate each student. And number two, I'd like to know what the ratio of teachers to administrative staff is in real numbers.
I'm not sure we have those numbers. Can the Board of Ed help us out on that, or we'll have to get back to them?
And on a, maybe you can bring that to your next meeting, but on a related question, 12 National Honor Society students is what percentage of your student body? And how does that?
How you measure it. If you, National Merit Scholars. It depends how you measure it. If you measure it as the size of the senior class, what's the current senior class? 225? 253. So. All right, if you'd like to come on up and use the microphone, because he can't hear you otherwise. Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh, could you give us your name and address? No. Gary, could you give us your name, your full name and address?
Gary Thurkelson, 8 Bittersweet Lane.
Thank you, Gary.
I gave it before, but that must have been when the mic wasn't working.
I apologize.
Gary, we can give you the 23-24 per pupil expenditure, not the current, based on the way the calculations are done by the state. And that, I believe, is $20,452.
Per student?
Yes.
Thank you.
The way the state calculates it, yes. In terms of just going back to the National Merit Scholar, Gary, we're not talking about National Honor Society. There are a lot of students that are in the National Honor Society. The National Merit Scholar program is much more elite and selective. And as I was mentioning earlier, many high schools in the United States and even in the state of Connecticut have no national merit scholars by the way they are chosen, either as finalists or as actual scholarship award winners. So 12 in one high school of our size especially is a large number. In terms of the ratio you asked, I don't have a ratio without us doing some more math. I can give you numbers of
But I can tell you,
staff.
generally speaking, that it has been lower in Connecticut, in Avon than it has been in surrounding towns. We did run that once, and that's what I remember the numbers being. So while everybody always says you've got too many administrative staff, we're lower than the surrounding towns.
How do we know that?
When I last
I'll
looked
come,
at it.
if you don't mind, Gary and Houston, I'll come back to the numbers just because we're on, the Wi-Fi wasn't working for us. So we're on a hot spot and it's glitching a little bit for getting, and I want to make sure we give an accurate answer.
Okay, we
So-
have two more people coming up.
I think those would be good things to add to your presentation. I think those are metrics that people understand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
If you could give us your name and address.
James Fitzgerald, Kennington Road. Thank you, everyone, for your service. I truly appreciate it. I just have some comments that I want to make, and hopefully I'll stick within the 3 minutes. Last year, you had nearly a $6 million increase in expenditures. Now, you had a very small percentage in terms of an increase of a mill rate, but you blame everything on the reval. So there are a lot of people that got hit significantly. They have to live with this for the next 4 years from the reval. It is what it is. But this taking of the fund balance and assigning it without approval of the taxpayers is downright dirty pool. Last year, you took $1.4 million. The town manager moved it from the fund over to an assignment, giving the taxpayers the impression that it's already assigned. We have no say in it, so it is what it is. And another $500,000 into a capital reserve account. Those accounts never existed. That is $1.9+ million that could have just stayed in the fund. And if you really want to budget for it, be clear and identify what it is. Capital reserve, as Mr. Roberts has said, well, if something breaks, we've got a surplus. A capital reserve of $500,000. That's the wrong way to do business. Taking $1.4 million was wrong as well. And then you went and took some money from the fund balance to help offset the tax increase. Well, this year, you're taking $1.775 million out of our fund balance, our taxpayer money that we paid for, and we overpaid, which you should be giving back to us, or reducing the budget. You're assigning that. And you're saying it's only an increase of $375,000. That is wrong. It's an increase of $1.775 million because you started with 1.4. So now you figure you're on a roll. You can hide it by just moving it from the left to the right. If you really need it, budget and say what it's for. That money belongs to the taxpayers, and that should help reduce what we have to handle relative to the increase. The other thing is I know you're struggling with this Board of Ed budget, and you struggled this year. You had significant increase last year. And of course, I see some reductions this year. But you got the new building. It is what it is. And it's like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you buy the building, they're going to fill it. You have a superintendent, an assistant superintendent, assistant superintendent, an assistant superintendent, and an assistant to the assistant superintendent. Tell me where that is paying off in the schools between the teacher and the children and student ratio. That is just an overabundance of administration. You got 33 positions going into this new building. You're going to fill it. And in my opinion, you've got a lot more tied up in administration than anywhere else. That number that you're looking at to try and hit the taxpayers with this year, you could take and probably get to 0% tax increase by reducing almost $1 million out of central office. And if you can't handle the central office, maybe you have the wrong leadership, and the Board of Ed really needs to look at this. Why do you have so many people as assistant superintendents? what the heck is going on in this town? It's out of, and I think we need a DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency here. That's probably what we need.
You're bucking up against your 3 minutes.
So I think that needs to be taken a look at. And I think the Board of Ed has one employee, and that's the superintendent. And if you don't have the right person or the right people, I think you need to change that team. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm not sure that calls for a response. Anyone else in the virtual world? Going once? Sure. Deb Shute would like to make a comment.
I appreciate the feedback and the wanting to save money, but I think there's a misunderstanding when certain people look at our materials. If you have a conversation with Dr. Carnamola, she's always more than happy to spend time explaining it to you. I think you're misunderstanding. We have 2 assistant superintendents. They have assistants, which means what we used to call secretaries that work for them. So I think you're misunderstanding the list, and we haven't changed any positions. Maybe titles have changed, but the number of people in those roles have existed for a long time. So we're not adding new people to the new building. We're bringing our people to the new building.
Thank you. If you could give us your name and your address.
Chris Gracer, 28 Lawrence Avenue. I wanted to go back to the question that Lisa Seminara had about what I don't know what fund that is. I am not great at math. It was about $245,000 that so simply put, we borrowed that last year to cover part of our budget. Is that correct?
$1.25 million.
$1.25 million.
It was called it's still called the unassigned fund balance.
So to be fiscally responsible, you then paid that back right
Correct.
away to avoid interest rates. I pay off my credit card every month, zero it out
Right.
to avoid interest rates. That's what you guys did, correct?
Correct. And then we then have a hole to fill in a sense that was $1.25 million worth of revenue that we used last year that isn't reoccurring. So we have to make
So
up for
you
it.
this year you have to cover that 1.5 million
1.25.
or 0.2 with revenue.
Yes.
If you can.
Yes.
So I think we have to, you got the town council and the Board of Finance and the Board of Education have to be fiscally responsible. You have fiduciary duties, and to get experimental with finance in the town, I think is very risky. And I think we have to recognize, especially after the budget failed to pass 3 times. And we don't know, but as has been mentioned before, many people voted against that budget, including me, because it is irresponsible to have a zero increase budget in this world. We cannot do it that way. So we don't know how many people voted against that budget because they wanted an increase, because it's responsible. We have to pay our bills.
Thank you very much. If you could come up and give us your name and your address.
Hi, Sue Henneberry, 488 Huckleberry Hill Road. Thanks, everybody, for the hard work. I, too, was a board member on Board of Ed, and I know the work that goes into this. This year in particular is like we're building budgets on houses of sand because of the whole national situation going on with funds. So I'm feeling a sense of fear, and the only way to get through that is to build trust. And I'm also hearing a lack of trust based on how the last budget played out. So a couple of questions. One is, can the budget referendum question be posed in such a way where it's clear whether the voters are saying, yes, I approve this money is sufficient? Maybe it's a 3-pronged question. No, I think the money is insufficient. or no, I think the money is too much. So I don't know.
Just to let you know, the town council's COUNSEL, the lawyers, town lawyers, draft the question for us. So we're kind of stuck with what they say. So they've never done that, but an interesting point.
Okay. I think in these uncertain times, as much clarity as we can offer, we'll build that trust that we need, right? We need that trust. Then the other thing, I'm looking at page 5 in your handout, and I think it's probably charter language, and it talks about using both the unassigned fund balance and the, I think it's the rainy day balance, the rainy day fund. And it's really clear by reading this that there is a prescriptive process in which someone has to demonstrate an unusual need to go into those funds, which to me implies it's a one-off need. It's a building collapsed. It's not a programmatic situation. We're going to fund it this year with this fund, but we know we need that program next year, so we're going to have to build it into the tax revenue. I just think if that's the situation, we need to be communicating clearly when we access those funds to the community.
That is the situation, but thank you for making it clear. All right. Anyone else in the virtual world? Going once, going twice, 3 times. I think we have one more person from the real world. After this person goes first.
Hello.
If you could give us your name and your address.
Sure. I'm Kayla Crystal Thurston, 562 Lovely Street. So I just wanted to clarify the voting on the budget. If 9% or less of the town population shows up, the budget, or votes, excuse me, no matter the outcome, it fails, or it passes, excuse me, sorry, passes.
Passes, correct.
So 91% of the town is not so up in arms about the budget, so they don't show up. So that's why it passes, and is my perspective on it. If people are really passionate about the budget, it seems to me that they should bring people with them to get the 9% that they need to be able to not pass the budget. So when we see like the 71% or whatever numbers were shared, that's 71% of less than 9% of our town population. So while it may seem really impressive, like it failed, or it didn't pass, I think I just wanted to make sure that that was very clear, because it seemed like we were still having questions about how could it not pass when it seemed like so many people are against it. But like you said, it's a democracy, and if people don't show up to vote, then they're not going to get what they want. And if they don't show up in numbers, they're not going to get what they want. So I just wanted to share that out as like a final clarifying point, because it seems like some people are still confused. And thank you for everything you do. Yay. Go Board of Ed. Go everybody. We love the teachers in Avon. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Sure. This is from Neil Livingston. I believe he lives on Craigmore Circle. How much capital is in the unassigned fund? I understand that Avon made over $3 million in interest last year, and that interest goes into the unassigned fund balance account. If the balance is more than $15 million, then we don't have to tax to replenish what was used last year.
Short answer is I don't know the answer to that question. Tom, do you know?
Yeah, there is $16.5 million in the unassigned fund balance as of June 30th, 2024.
Okay. And Tom, what was the percentage the Board of Finance and the Town Council said is an ideal balance to maintain our bond rating? It's 14%?
The goal that was established in the most recent update to the unassigned fund balance policy was 15%.
Okay.
For point of clarification, that 16.5 million is 15.74%.
That's correct, yeah.
So we are over the target that we set.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any more questions from the audience? Young lady coming up, if you could give us your name and street address.
I don't know if I'm young, but my name's Kathy Randall, and I live at 135 Northington Drive. Not to beat a dead horse, but just to get back to Lisa Seminara's question. The money was borrowed from the unassigned fund balance, and then it was repaid with the extra income at the end of the year. You then start out the year fresh, just like you've started out every other year. You've chosen to pick one type of revenue to focus on. But you could have any sort of revenue that would fade away or be gone. So you just picked the $1,250,000 that had reduced the taxes. I mean, if you have fewer people using the pool, you'll have less income at the pool. If you have a commercial building that a developer, a tenant leaves, maybe it's valued less and you have fewer taxes. So you've chosen one line item. So you're just starting fresh. It's not a fiscal cliff. You're starting fresh. You had the extra income, you paid it back. And people keep, harping on that point, but it's not a point. So, and in fact, we're actually probably going to have over $1 million of extra income on the interest line item again this year. And we've had, $5.5 million of ARPA funds. And I never heard anyone say, well, we're going to miss the ARPA funds next year. So we have lots of sources and we have lots of uses of funds that happen to be one source of funding. So anyway, just to clarify that. My other comment is we have had $5.5 million of ARPA, and then we've had probably close to $4 or $5 million of extra interest income. So that's a lot of money that we've had over the last 3 or 4 years to use. And then I see big projects that we're considering. Jim Spike has mentioned $67 to $70 million for fire stations. And we're looking at maybe $8 to $10 million on Old Farms Road. People are asking about connectivity. And I see a lot of soft costs, architects and engineers coming in. So I feel like we really need to have, whether you call it a Doge or a come to Jesus meeting, but we really have to have a discussion of what the wants are versus the needs. We really haven't had a lot of money to pave our roads. We've used the ARPA money. We've used the extra interest income to pave the roads. So I think we do need to have a good discussion, long-term discussion of what are our priorities and how are we going to fund all the wants. Maybe we should be sharing resources with, neighboring towns. Maybe we should be using outside contractors instead of paying the snowplow drivers $82 an hour. Maybe we should be sharing our library resources or maybe our fire resources. So I just throw that out there. Maybe we need to think a little bit outside the box. And in terms of some of these larger projects, I see soft costs going out and we don't have a budget before we go to the soft costs. So maybe we should start and say, what do we want to, what can we afford on a fire station? If we can't afford 70 million, then maybe we should come up with a budget before we go out and tell the architects to design something. I mean, if you're going out and you only have a budget of $500,000 for a house, you're not going to go be looking at houses that cost $4 or $5 million. So anyway, just my comments. Maybe we could
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you came in just.
And thank you all for your service. I know we don't always agree on everything, but thank you, everyone on the boards. Both my parents were teachers. 3 siblings are teachers. So I appreciate everyone, their work, their service to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. You just made it under 3 minutes. You timed it well. All right. Further questions? Going once, going twice. I'm sorry? Yeah, if you have the answer, come on up. I always like having answers.
So this isn't the ratio, as I mentioned, Gary was looking for, and if anyone else is, we can certainly do that math. And as Houston mentioned, the state publishes that on a site anyway for every school district in the state of Connecticut, but it's usually at least a couple of years behind. This is just in local funding. This is not any salaries for certified people that might be in grant funding. So these are the numbers that are in the budget. We have 286 certified teachers, and we have 20 administrators, wall to wall, so to speak. And just back to the Fisher Drive piece, just revisit that for a moment. As Deb said, just want to be clear. In the time that I've been here as a superintendent, I haven't recommended we hire any additional administrators. We are working with the folks that we have. There have been changes in people coming on, retiring, and so forth. And there was a change to the Director of Human Resources title as we moved forward and kept with compliance related to state, you name it, and also investigations and working with DCF and so forth. As the Director of Human Resources, that person did that. That person still does that as the Assistant Superintendent. However, since the person is a certified administrator, he is also able to do investigations that are related to issues with students. And so that was the primary reason for the change in the title at the time. But that position existed in the budget, actually even before my time here. So the majority of us that are moving to, all of us that are moving to Fisher Drive, those projections were started years ago by an architect well before this project took off. And we have not added folks in there with the exception of IT. We have increased our IT staff, I believe, net by 2 people in the last 7 years. And a lot of that is due to the number of pieces of equipment that they are working with. And we have been, which has obviously increased over time and increased significantly after 2020 when we needed to give every student in the district a device. So we have not quite one IT person per building that they manage, and 3,200 and I think 53, something like that, Chromebooks in the hands of students. Every teacher has a computer and or a laptop, depending on the room, and so forth. So that piece was necessary. But again, those people are not administrators. The majority of folks that work at the district office are not administrators. Administrative assistants that are in the list, those are people that 10 or 20 or more years ago may have called secretaries. Their union contract, if they have it, refers to them as administrative assistants. Some executive, so to speak, just the title that they were given. Between me and the 2 assistant superintendents, there are 2 secretaries. And one of those 2 actually is, well, they both really split the work, does pretty much the work for everyone that is there with us. The rest of the folks are payroll, benefits, purchasing, accounts payable. All of those things have to be kept separate for audit reasons and financial checks and balances. The director of IT, for example, that is a person, it's not a certified administrator, but it is the individual who manages all of the security on our networks and all of our infrastructure related to internet and our devices. And that's actually something we're very lucky to have because we have saved money by not having to contract out those services. Years ago, we were paying more than a person's salary for half of the service to an outside firm to manage all of that for us. So that actually was a plus when we were able to. I know it might be somewhere here, hire you, Mr. Klein, thank you. It has actually saved us money. So we are certainly not looking for any more of us to do the job, although I will, say in all honesty, we have continued to add staff as necessary for students and student supports, teachers, paraeducators, interventionists, social workers, psychologists. Over the years, we have continued to add those people because our students have needed them. We have not added administrators. And unfortunately, the workload there hasn't gone down. It stays the same or goes up because all of these unfunded mandates that we speak of, amidst other things, end up on the plate of those folks like us. So we are, we're doing our best to do what we can with what we have in terms of the administrators. I know there are other questions about that. I'm happy to answer them. Just wanted to be clear that we are also moving into a space that's nearly the same size. Even though the architects said we needed more space, we currently have 13,660 square feet, and we are moving into 13,744 square feet. So we agreed to clearly reduce the amount of space because it was what was fiscally responsible in terms of the town being able to rent out the other units, and it seemed to make sense. So we'll make that work and not go by the architect's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, there being no further discussion, the annual budget public hearing is adjourned to the budget workshop. It's on Wednesday, April 9 at 7 p.m. in the Senior Center, this very room. It will also have a virtual component. Assuming we come up with a budget the Board of Finance deems desirable, we will recommend the revised budget to the annual budget meeting for the town, which is May 5, 7 p.m. at the Senior Center, here where we are. And then the recommended budget will be submitted for referendum on May 14 at the Senior Center, once again here, between the hours of 6 a.m., and I will not be here at 6 a.m. to vote on the budget, and to 8 p.m. So that should give everybody enough time. And I would urge you to come and vote on the budget. Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned.